The sirens cut through the quiet morning, and before I could even grab my shoes, two officers were already striding up my driveway. My pregnant wife stood frozen on the lawn, yoga mat at her feet, tears streaking her face. Across the street, Karen from the HOA was grinning, arms folded like she'd finally won. "She's unstable," Karen shrieked, pointing at my wife's belly. "She's a danger to this neighborhood." I stepped forward, heart pounding, realizing this wasn't just another complaint, it was a full-blown attack. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. My name is Daniel, and if there's one thing you should know about me, it's this: I don't scare easily. I've spent most of my adult life in construction and property management. I've built homes from the ground up, poured concrete in 100-degree heat, and fought tooth and nail through every inspection, code review, and county bureaucrat you can imagine. I know walls, I know foundations, and I know when someone is trying to undermine one. But my real foundation isn't made of brick or lumber. It's my family. 3 years ago, my wife Emily and I bought this house. It wasn't the biggest on the block, and it sure as hell wasn't the fanciest, but it was ours. The first place we could truly call home. When I carried her through the front door for the first time, I promised her, and myself, that this would be the place where we'd grow roots, where we'd feel safe, where we'd raise our children. Emily is more than my wife. She's my anchor. She's a yoga instructor who brings peace and calm to everyone around her. Even through pregnancy, she's never let her strength slip. Every morning, like clockwork, she unrolls her mat in the front yard. She takes deep breaths, she stretches, she connects to something bigger than all of us. Watching her out there in the morning sun is like watching a flower bloom. It's simple, it's pure, it's beautiful. That ritual isn't just exercise. It's her lifeline, and by extension, it's mine too. You see, I didn't grow up with peace. My childhood was full of noise. Shouting neighbors, crowded apartments, police sirens echoing through the night. I worked my way out of that life by building things. Real, tangible things. Every wall I raised, every beam I nailed in place, was a step closer to the kind of stability I never had as a kid. So, when I tell you that I fight for my family, for my wife, for the sanctity of this home, know that it comes from a place deep in my bones. This isn't just about property lines or neighborhood rules. It's about protecting the life I clawed my way into. When Emily became pregnant, that fight took on new meaning. Every sound in the night made me alert. Every step she took, I wanted to shield her. The thought of bringing a child into this world filled me with joy, but also with a promise that I would do whatever it took to keep them safe. And that's why this war with Karen isn't just some petty neighbor dispute to me. It's personal. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, saw something in us she didn't like. Maybe it was Emily's independence. Maybe it was me refusing to bow to her false authority. Maybe it was just the fact that we wouldn't bend. Whatever it was, she made us her target, but she didn't count on one thing. I'm not built to roll over. In my line of work, you deal with inspectors, landlords, and corporate big shots who think they can bully you because they've got a clipboard or a title. I learned early on that the only way to stand up to people like that is with truth, with evidence, and with grit. I've stood in front of city boards defending my projects. I've faced down developers who wanted to cut corners, and every time, I walked away with my head high, because I knew my work was solid. That same grit, that same relentless drive, is exactly what I would use to protect my wife. Emily tried to brush it off in the beginning. She told me not to worry, that Karen's letters and stares were just noise. But I could see it wearing her down, the stress lines on her face, the way her hands trembled when she picked up another notice from the HOA, the way she started hesitating before stepping outside with her mat. I couldn't stand it. This home is supposed to be her sanctuary, our sanctuary. And instead, Karen turned it into a battlefield. But let me tell you something about me. I've been in real battles. I've fought for every paycheck, every job, every chance to prove myself. I've had bosses threaten to fire me, inspectors threaten to fine me, and still I stood my ground. Because when you build something with your own two hands, you don't let anyone tear it down. And that's exactly how I saw my family, my wife, my unborn child, as something I had built, something sacred. I fight because I refuse to let fear win. I fight because I know bullies like Karen thrive when people stay quiet. And I fight because one day, when my daughter asks me what I did when someone tried to hurt her mom, I want to look her in the eyes and tell her the truth. That I stood tall, that I protected her, that I never backed down. This isn't just a story about a neighbor. This is a story about legacy, about roots, about the kind of man I choose to be. And if Karen thought she could intimidate us into silence, she picked the wrong family. Because when it comes to protecting my wife and my home, I will never, ever stop fighting. At first, I thought Karen was just another uptight neighbor with too much time on her hands. But the longer we lived here, the more I realized she wasn't just annoying. She was dangerous. Karen had a pattern. It always started small, subtle, easy to dismiss. But each act was calculated, a seed planted, waiting to grow into something bigger. The first sign was the notes. They weren't official HOA letters, just folded slips of paper tucked under our doormat or wedged into the mailbox slot. The handwriting was sharp, almost angry, like every letter had been stabbed onto the page. Your garden is unsightly. Outdoor activities must not disturb the character of this neighborhood. Pregnancy hormones make people unpredictable. Please keep things private, no signature. But I didn't need one. Karen's perfume lingered on the paper. Emily laughed them off at first. "She's ridiculous," she said, rolling her eyes. But I noticed her folding the notes carefully, slipping them into the kitchen drawer instead of throwing them away, as if some part of her knew they were evidence. Karen's power came from the HOA, and she used it like a sword. One neighbor down the street parked his truck halfway on the curb for 3 straight days. Nothing. Another left Christmas lights hanging until April. No complaint. But Emily stretching on her yoga mat? Suddenly we were disturbing the neighborhood's order. The hypocrisy was chilling. It wasn't about rules. It was about control. She picked her targets, and once she picked you, she didn't let go. Then came the stairs. Every morning when Emily stepped outside, Karen was there, standing on her porch, arms crossed, watching. Not waving, not smiling, just watching. Emily tried to ignore it, but I saw how it got under her skin. Her movements grew tighter, less fluid. Her breathing faster, less relaxed. Yoga was supposed to calm her. Now it felt like surveillance. Some mornings, Karen even lifted her phone, pretending to scroll. But I knew she was filming. Next, she turned the neighbors against us. At first it was subtle, whispers at the mailbox, a pause in conversation when we walked by. Then one day, Emily came home shaken. She told Mrs. Jacobs, "I'm unstable," she whispered, voice breaking. She said I'm dangerous because of pregnancy hormones. I clenched my fists. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was defamation. Karen wasn't trying to control Emily. She was trying to isolate her, to paint her as a threat, so when she struck harder, no one would defend us. It was psychological warfare. One afternoon, I pulled into the driveway to find Emily cornered. Karen had blocked her on the sidewalk, wagging a finger in her face. "You need to stop flaunting yourself," she hissed. "This isn't a yoga studio. This is a neighborhood." Emily's face was pale. She looked trapped. I stormed out of the truck and Karen backed away, smiling sweetly like nothing had happened. "Just offering some advice," she said before strutting off. That's when I knew she wasn't just enforcing rules. She was playing a game, a sick game where she pushed boundaries, waited for a reaction, then twisted it to her advantage. The official warnings came next. Noise violations. Even though Emily practiced in silence, littering citations, because her yoga mat was unsightly, a threat of fines for non-conforming use of property. Every single one was baseless, but each required a written response, a signature, a meeting. She was drowning us in paperwork, trying to break us down. I've dealt with red tape before, but this was different. This wasn't about compliance. This was about control through exhaustion. Make enough noise, and maybe we'd pack up and leave. The creepiest thing about Karen wasn't her words. It was her smile, that thin, smug grin she wore whenever she cornered us. It wasn't the smile of a neighbor. It was the smile of a predator. She'd tilt her head, squint her eyes, and let her lips curl just slightly like she was savoring every ounce of power she stole from us. And every time I saw it, I felt a chill, because that smile told me one thing. This wasn't about rules or even dislike. This was about domination. The night I realized just how far Karen was willing to go, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, holding another warning letter. Her hands were shaking. "Daniel," she whispered, "I don't feel safe anymore." That broke me. This was our home, our sanctuary. And now, because of one woman's obsession with power, my wife, carrying our child, was afraid to sit on her own porch. Karen wasn't just annoying, she wasn't just controlling, she was escalating. And deep down, I knew where this was heading. Karen's pattern was clear. Start with small intimidation. Isolate the target, escalate the harassment, weaponize authority. It wasn't random, it was strategy, calculated, cold. And if I didn't stop her, she was going to take this all the way. I had seen enough bullies in my life to know Karen wasn't going to stop until she felt she had won. But what she didn't realize is that I wasn't about to let her win. Not now, not ever. Every villain has a moment when the game stopped being petty, when the intimidation turns into something that rattles you to your core. For us, that moment came late on a Wednesday evening, and it was Karen's first real strike. It started with the photos. Emily had just finished her evening yoga. Nothing unusual, nothing loud. The sun was low, the air warm, and she stood quietly rolling up her mat. That's when she noticed it, the glint of a camera flash across the street. Karen. She was standing on her porch, phone in hand, snapping pictures like some tabloid photographer. But it wasn't just one or two shots. She clicked furiously, zooming in, stepping forward, crouching for angles. When Emily caught her eye, Karen didn't look away. She smiled and kept taking photos. My wife came inside, shaken. "She was photographing me," she whispered, clutching her mat like a shield. I brushed it off, tried to calm her. "She's trying to rattle you, Em." "Ignore it." But I could see it in her face. She felt violated, like her privacy had been stolen, and she was right. The next morning, it escalated. An official HOA letter arrived. Karen had filed a complaint. Resident engaging in prohibited outdoor activities in violation of community aesthetics. Attached were printed photos of Emily, pregnant, barefoot, practicing yoga on our lawn. The images looked clinical, invasive, cropped tightly, zoomed in on her body. Seeing them made my stomach twist. "They're treating me like I'm doing something indecent," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "I was just stretching." That night, she cried herself to sleep, and I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, fury boiling in my chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was targeted harassment, documented, packaged, and sent through the system. After that, everything changed. Emily stopped going outside in the evenings. She kept the blinds drawn, afraid Karen might be lurking with her phone. I'd catch her standing in the hallway, peeking through the curtains, checking the street before she stepped out the door. The woman who once moved with grace and confidence now hesitated with every step. And it wasn't just her. One night, I found myself double-checking the locks, walking the perimeter of the house like a guard dog. Every rustle outside made me tense. I even caught myself snapping at Emily when she suggested going for a walk after dinner. "She's watching," I muttered. "It's not safe." The truth was, Karen's intimidation was working. She had planted fear in our home, and it was spreading like poison. The next blow came in person. I was pulling weeds in the front yard when Karen strolled up, clipboard in hand. Her smile was sharp, her tone sickly sweet. "Daniel," she said, drawing out my name, "we've received multiple reports about your wife's behavior." I froze, dirt on my gloves, sweat on my brow. Her behavior? She was doing yoga. On her own lawn, Karen tilted her head. Perception is everything in a neighborhood like this. Some residents feel uncomfortable. It would be better for everyone if she kept her activities inside. I stepped closer. She's 7 months pregnant. Yoga is how she stays healthy. And she's not breaking any rule. Karen's smile widened. Rules can be interpreted, and the board relies on me to interpret them. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just bluffing. She was declaring war. That night, Emily broke down. "I feel like I'm being hunted," she sobbed into my chest. "Every time I step outside, she's there. What if she calls Child Protective Services when the baby comes? What if she tells people I'm unstable? Her words cut deep. Because they weren't paranoid. They were real fears. And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. I could build a house. I could pour concrete, raise walls, wire electricity. But how do you build a shield against someone who lives across the street and weaponizes rules to torment you? I held her tighter, whispering, "I'll protect you. I promise." But inside, doubt gnawed at me. The following week, another notice arrived. This one threatened fines. Continued noncompliance will result in financial penalties. For what? For breathing? For existing outside? Emily looked at me, exhausted. Maybe we should just move. Move? After all the sweat, money, and hope we poured into this house. After the promises I made to her, that was the moment I knew. We weren't just dealing with a cranky neighbor. We were dealing with someone who would escalate until we broke. Karen's first strike wasn't just about yoga. It was about planting fear, testing boundaries, and seeing how far she could push before we fought back. From then on, the house felt different. Emily tiptoed around her own home. I walked around like a watchdog, always tense, always scanning. The joy we once felt in our little sanctuary had been poisoned. And worst of all, our unborn child was now part of the equation. Every ounce of stress Emily felt, every tear she shed, weighed heavier because I knew it wasn't just affecting her. It was affecting our baby too. I'd fought plenty of battles in my life. But this was different. This was my family. And if Karen wanted to fight, she was about to get one. Every battle has a tipping point. The moment when tension snaps, when fear turns into a full-blown crisis. For us, it came on a Saturday morning, the kind of morning that should have been ordinary, but instead shattered everything. The sun was rising soft and golden, filtering through the blinds. Emily rolled out her mat on the lawn, like she always did. She was 7 months pregnant, moving slowly, carefully, her hands resting on her belly as she stretched. I stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee, watching her through the window. It should have been peaceful. It should have been safe. But I noticed movement across the street. Karen. She was already outside, phone in hand, pacing like a hunter circling prey. My stomach tightened. Something was coming. It started with a scream. "Get off the community property!" Karen's voice ripped through the air like a siren. Emily froze mid-stretch, her hands trembling. "I'm on my own lawn," she said softly, but Karen was already storming toward her. "You're disturbing the neighborhood," she shouted, waving her phone like a weapon. "You're a danger to everyone here." I dropped the mug, coffee splattering across the counter, and sprinted for the door. By the time I reached the yard, Karen was standing only a few feet from Emily, jabbing her finger toward her swollen stomach. "Unstable!" she barked. "She's unstable!" My wife's eyes filled with tears. She wrapped her arms protectively around her belly, whispering, "Please stop." That's when Karen dialed. I heard every word. 911? Yes, it's urgent. There's a pregnant woman, screaming, thrashing around. She's threatening people. Send officers quickly. She's dangerous. My blood went cold. Emily hadn't moved a muscle. She stood frozen in place, trembling, barely even breathing. And Karen was painting her as a violent threat. I shouted, "That's a lie! She's lying!" But Karen turned her back to me, pacing, voice full of theatrical panic. "She's going crazy in the yard! Please hurry!" Minutes later, the wail of sirens echoed down the street. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt, lights flashing, engines growling. Officers jumped out, hands resting on their holsters, scanning the scene like they expected chaos. And there stood Emily, barefoot, silent, clutching her belly in shock. Karen pointed at her, eyes wide with fake terror. "That's her! That's the woman I told you about!" Emily whispered my name, her voice shaking. "Daniel!" I stepped forward, hands raised. "Officers, this is a mistake." She's pregnant. She was just doing yoga. But the officers didn't lower their guard. They turned to Emily. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions. Please stay calm, stay calm." As if she had been anything but calm. The sight of uniformed men closing in on my wife made my heart pound like a drum. Emily's breathing grew ragged. I could see the fear in her eyes. Not just fear for herself, but fear for our baby. Stress like this could trigger early labor. I knew it. She knew it. I wanted to scream, to throw Karen off our property, to make it all stop. But one wrong move, one raised voice, and the officers might see me as the problem. So I forced myself still, hands open, voice low. Please, check the cameras. We have security footage. You'll see she's telling the truth. Karen laughed, sharp and cruel. He's making excuses. They've been a problem since day one. Doors cracked open. Curtains twitched. The entire street was watching. Some neighbors stood silently, arms crossed, unwilling to get involved. Others looked uncertain, whispering to one another. No one spoke up, except one. Mr. Harris, the older man next door, shuffled out onto his porch. His voice shook, but carried across the street. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't threatening anyone. I saw the whole thing. The officers glanced at him, then back at Karen, then at Emily. The tension wavered. For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. But Karen didn't flinch. She smirked, that same predator's smile. You'll see, she said, smug and certain. You'll see she's unstable. I've documented everything. In that moment, I realized her entire strategy. Overwhelm with lies, force us to defend ourselves, bury us under her performance until the truth got lost. But what she didn't know was that the cameras had caught it all. As the officers calmed, I led them to the front door. Come inside, I said. Watch the footage. On the screen, the truth played out. Emily standing silently. Karen storming the lawn. The fake call. The police arriving to find nothing. Clear, undeniable. The officers' faces hardened. They exchanged looks. Karen's smirk faltered. The cruisers pulled away an hour later. The street eerily quiet again. Emily sat on the couch, her hands trembling, eyes red from crying. I thought they were going to take me away, she whispered. I thought they'd believe her. I knelt beside her, holding her hands tight. They didn't. We have proof. This isn't over, but we're not powerless. Because in that moment, as shaken as I was, I knew we had something Karen didn't count on. Evidence, footage, witnesses, a record of her lies. Karen had escalated. She had crossed the line. And now, it was only a matter of time before her own weapon turned against her. When the squad cars left and the street returned to silence, I knew one thing. Karen had crossed a line she couldn't walk back from. She thought she'd humiliated us. She thought she'd terrified us into submission. But what she didn't realize was that her little stunt left fingerprints everywhere, and I was about to trace every single one. The first thing I did was pull the security footage. We had cameras mounted on the garage, the porch, and even one by the mailbox. They caught everything, not just the arrival of the cops, but the entire buildup. On the screen, the truth played out like a movie. Emily, calm and silent, stretching on the mat. Karen storming across the street, screaming accusations. Her phone pressed to her ear as she spat lies into the receiver. Then, the police rolling in, searching for chaos that didn't exist. I paused, rewound, played it again. Every second was crystal clear. No screaming, no threats, no instability. Just one woman practicing yoga and another abusing emergency services to harass her. Next, I filed a public records request for the 911 call. Most people don't know you can do that, but I've been around construction long enough to deal with public documents and government records. When the transcript came through, I almost couldn't believe it. Word for word, Karen's voice was immortalized in black and white. She's screaming, thrashing, threatening the neighborhood. Every single claim, false. And I had the footage to prove it. I lined them up side by side. On one screen, the 911 transcript. On the other, the video of Emily standing silently, tears in her eyes. It was the smoking gun. The footage and call log were solid. But I knew people would try to say I edited the video or twisted the words. That's where witnesses mattered. I knocked on doors. Some neighbors avoided me, eyes darting nervously like they didn't want to get involved. Karen had that effect on people. Fear kept them silent. But then, I came to Mr. Harris. He opened the door slowly, leaning on his cane. His voice was low, but steady. I saw it all, he said. She lied. You're Wife never did a thing wrong. I asked if he'd be willing to say that publicly. He hesitated, glanced toward Karen's house, then back at me. Finally, he nodded. It's time someone stood up. That moment felt like a crack in Karen's armor. For the first time, someone else was willing to shine a light on her lies. I dug deeper. Karen had filed multiple HOA violation reports against us, each one nastier than the last. I requested copies from the board. What I found was a pattern. Vague accusations, no dates, no supporting evidence. Just Karen's word against ours. But now, with this video and the transcript, her credibility was shot. The reports looked less like official complaints and more like a personal vendetta documented on HOA letterhead. At the next HOA meeting, I noticed something different. The board members, usually stiff and silent, shifted uncomfortably when Karen spoke. One of them, a woman named Denise, avoided eye contact with her altogether. After the meeting, Denise quietly approached me. "Daniel," she whispered, "I saw the police report. Something isn't right. Karen's pushing things too far." I showed her a clip of the footage on my phone. She pressed a hand to her mouth. "She said your wife was screaming." I nodded. "You see the truth." Denise didn't say more, but her expression told me enough. The board wasn't blindly following Karen anymore. Doubt had taken root. Once I had everything, I compiled it into a single package, a timeline of events, copies of the HOA violation letters, the 911 transcript, security footage with timestamps, a written statement from Mr. Harris. I printed it, bound it, and delivered copies to the HOA board and to the local police department. No technical jargon, no fancy formatting, just plain truth laid out in black and white. "This," I said, handing it to the officer at the front desk, "proves she lied." After that, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted. Karen still strutted down the street with her clipboard, still tossed fake smiles my way. But there was a tightness in her expression, a flicker of uncertainty. She knew. She knew I had the evidence. And she knew it was only a matter of time before her lies caught up with her. One evening, as I took out the trash, I heard two neighbors talking near the corner. "She called the cops on a pregnant woman," one whispered. "Daniel's got proof," the other replied. "I heard he showed the board the video." Karen's power thrived on silence and fear. But now, whispers were turning against her. People were questioning. People were doubting. And doubt is poison to a tyrant. I knew it wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down gracefully. She would fight, she would scheme, she would twist the truth until her last breath. But this time, I wasn't the only one standing against her. I had proof. I had witnesses. I had cracks forming in her once iron grip on the board. The next step wasn't gathering evidence. The next step was showing it, publicly, undeniably, in a way that would destroy her credibility forever. And the stage for that showdown was already set. The next HOA meeting wasn't going to be business as usual. It was going to be a reckoning. The HOA meeting room smelled like stale coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. Rows of folding chairs lined the walls, neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder, their whispers filling the air like static. Everyone knew something was about to happen. At the front sat Karen, perched behind the table with her gavel like she was presiding over a courtroom. Her posture was stiff, her chin high, that smug smirk plastered on her face. She thought she still had control, but I was about to take it from her. Karen tapped the gavel, calling the meeting to order. "First item on the agenda," she announced, her voice dripping with authority, "is the continued violations committed by the Daniels household." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some heads turned toward me and Emily. My wife gripped my hand under the table, her knuckles pale, but her eyes locked on me with trust. Karen continued, "These ongoing disruptions, public disturbances, unsightly activities, and unsafe behavior threaten the character of our neighborhood. Fines are being considered." She sat back, smiling. To her, this was already won. I stood slowly, letting the chair scrape the tile floor. All eyes turned to me. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. "Karen," I said, "you've accused my wife of disturbing the neighborhood, of being unsafe, of violating rules that don't even exist. Tonight, I'm going to show the truth. Karen rolled her eyes. Mr. Daniels, this meeting is not for personal grievances. Please sit down before we... I cut her off. This isn't a grievance. This is evidence. The room fell silent. I set my laptop on the table, connected the projector, and pressed play. On the wall, the footage flickered to life. Emily appeared, calm, barefoot, stretching peacefully on the lawn. The room was silent except for her steady breathing. Then Karen stormed into frame, screaming, gesturing wildly, dialing her phone. The clip ended with the arrival of the police cruisers, lights flashing, officers stepping out, confused, scanning the scene for chaos that wasn't there. Gasps filled the room. Someone muttered, "That's not what she said happened." Karen shifted in her seat, her smirk twitching. Before she could speak, I held up a printed page. Here's the 911 transcript. Karen claimed my wife was screaming and thrashing and threatening neighbors. I pointed back to the video frozen on the screen. Emily standing perfectly still, clutching her stomach, silent tears running down her face. Does anyone here see screaming? Thrashing? Threats? Heads shook, voices whispered. Karen's face flushed red. This is being taken out of context, she snapped. Rules clearly state... Rules, I said, cutting her off. This isn't about rules. This is about lies. I turned toward the back of the room. Mr. Harris? The older man rose slowly, leaning on his cane. His voice wavered, but every word carried weight. I saw it all, he said. Emily never screamed, never threatened anyone. She stood there quietly while Karen screamed at her. And then she lied to the police. A murmur spread through the crowd. Neighbors exchanged looks, nodding. The tide was turning. Karen slammed the gavel down. Enough! You're twisting this. You think you can manipulate people with theatrics, but the fact remains, I am authorized to enforce HOA rules, and the Daniels family has been nothing but disruptive. Her voice cracked with desperation, but Denise, the board member who had been watching silently all night, finally spoke. Karen, we've reviewed the bylaws. There's nothing that prohibits outdoor exercise. And after seeing this video, she paused, looking directly at her. It's clear you abused your position. Karen's eyes widened. You can't... Yes, Denise cut in firmly. We can. Denise turned to the rest of the board. I motioned to censure Karen effective immediately, pending further investigation by law enforcement. Hands went up, one after another. A majority. Karen's face drained of color. You can't do this to me, she hissed, standing. I am this neighborhood. No, I said, my voice low but sharp. You were its bully. And tonight, everyone saw the truth. Just as Karen opened her mouth to scream again, 2 uniformed officers entered the room, the same officers from that morning. Karen Whitfield, one said, we've reviewed the evidence submitted. You're being charged with filing a false police report and harassment. The room erupted in whispers. Neighbors craned their necks to see. Karen froze. The gavel slipped from her hand and clattered against the floor. The officers guided her out, her protests echoing down the hallway. This isn't over. You'll regret this. You'll all regret this. But for once, nobody looked afraid. When the door closed behind her, the room let out a collective breath. It felt like a storm cloud had finally lifted. Emily squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. But this time, they were tears of relief. Denise faced the room. From this day forward, this board will not be run by intimidation or abuse. We will rebuild trust. Together, the neighbors nodded. Some even clapped softly. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. Karen's reign of fear had ended not with another whisper, but with the truth laid bare for everyone to see. She had tried to bury us under lies, but in the end, the truth buried her. And as I walked Emily out of that room, into the night air that finally felt safe again, I knew one thing for certain. We had won. The night Karen was led out of the HOA meeting in handcuffs, something in the air shifted. For months, our neighborhood had lived under her shadow. People avoided eye contact, lowered their voices, and let fear dictate their silence. But when that door closed behind her, it felt like the first deep breath after a storm. Shaky, but cleansing. For Emily and me, it wasn't just a board meeting. It was the end of a nightmare. The very next morning, Emily walked outside with her yoga mat. No hesitation, no glancing over her shoulder. The sun rose golden on her face as she closed her eyes and stretched, her hands resting gently on her swollen belly. For the first time in months, there were no glares, no cameras, no shouted accusations. Just quiet. Just peace. I watched from the porch, coffee in hand, and felt tears sting my eyes. She looked free again. My wife, the woman I loved, not a prisoner of harassment, but herself. That moment alone would have been enough. But what happened next surprised both of us. One by one, neighbors stepped outside. First Mrs. Jacobs, the woman who had once whispered Karen's rumors. Then a young couple from the end of the street. Then Mr. Harris, steady as ever with his cane. Each of them carried something under their arm, yoga mats. They unrolled them in their yards, stretched their arms, and silently joined Emily. It wasn't about exercise, it was a statement. A neighborhood reclaiming its freedom. Emily's lips trembled, then broke into the brightest smile I'd seen in months. She wasn't alone anymore, none of us were. That weekend I planted a tree in the front yard, a young maple, its roots fragile but determined, its leaves catching the wind like little flames. Emily stood beside me, her hand resting on her belly as I patted the soil into place. "For her," I said, nodding at her stomach. "For her," she whispered back. That tree wasn't just landscaping, it was a promise, a symbol of resilience, that no matter how hard someone tried to uproot us, we would grow stronger, deeper, unshakable. Every time I water it, I think of the storm we survived, and the life we're building beyond it. The next project was smaller, but just as meaningful. Our mailbox had been a favorite target of Karen's complaints. Too dull, too crooked, not in keeping with the community standard. I'd repainted it once already, but under her reign, it always felt like an act of submission. This time, it felt different. Emily picked the color, bright blue, bold, cheerful. A color that said, "We're here, and we're not hiding anymore." As the paint dried in the sun, neighbors walked by, waving, smiling. No glares, no whispers. Just community. At the following HOA meeting, the board looked different. Karen's chair sat empty. Denise, the board member who had once whispered her doubts, now sat at the head of the table. Her first order of business was simple but powerful. Transparency. Rules were clarified, enforcement was balanced, and neighbors were invited to actually participate in decisions instead of being ruled by fear. For the first time since moving here, the HOA didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like what it was meant to be. A structure for fairness, a system to keep the neighborhood thriving. Life slowly returned to normal, but with a new layer of connection. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now waved on walks, offered to water each other's gardens, or helped carry groceries. Evening walks felt safe again. Morning coffee on the porch felt calm again. Emily blossomed in her final weeks of pregnancy. The stress lines on her face melting into a glow I hadn't seen since before all this began. When she finally gave birth to our daughter, she held her close and whispered, "You're safe now." And I believed her. The legacy of what happened isn't just Karen's downfall. It's what we learned and what we built after. We learned that silence feeds bullies, that fear only grows in shadows, that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to drag the truth into the light, no matter how hard it shakes the ground beneath you. We built something stronger than walls or fences. We built trust. We built community. We built a home that isn't just ours, but a place where our daughter will grow up knowing what it means to stand tall against intimidation. So, here's what I want you to take away. If someone abuses power, whether it's an HOA, a boss, or a bully down the street, you are not powerless. Evidence, truth, and courage can bring even the loudest tyrant down. And if you're facing that fight right now, I want you to remember my story. Remember my wife, standing barefoot on the lawn, accused of being unstable just for breathing. Remember the way one woman's lies crumbled under the weight of the truth. You don't have to take it. If you've ever had an HOA abuse power, subscribe now and share your story in the comments. Together, we can shine a light on every Karen who thinks fear is stronger than truth. Because when neighbors unite, When families fight back, and when truth finally takes center stage, bullies lose, always.